In After Effects, a mask is simply a path. The primary use for this kind of path is to determine areas of transparency, but masks can also be used as paths for effects. Let's see examples of both of these uses. You create masks in After Effects using either the Shape tools or the Pen tool. We'll draw a simple shape, specifically an ellipse, and we'll draw it on this can. Now we need to make sure that the layer is selected. Otherwise, when we draw, we'll draw a shape layer instead of a mask. I'll start by pressing the mouse button, and as soon as I begin to press the mouse button, I'll press Control so that the circle, or the ellipse that I draw, grows from the center. If I hold the Shift key, then I constrain the ellipse tool to only draw a perfect circle. Now letting go of the mouse button, there, I have a circle drawn around the logo. Now as you notice, the default behavior is for the mask to define transparency. Everything outside of this mask on the can layer has been made transparent. I'll turn off the background layer so that you can see, and I'll turn the background back on. We can make the mask not affect transparency by changing its mask mode to none. And now I'll apply an effect that uses the mask. I'll use the Vegas effect. I'll type V-E-G-A-S, and then drag the Vegas effect onto the layer. And I'll choose to have the stroke go around the mask. I'll increase the width of the stroke by quite a lot so that we can actually see it, and make the hardness quite a lot greater so that we have more distinctive dots. And I'll decrease the number of segments by a bit. Animate rotation by clicking the stopwatch, and then I'll move the current time indicator to the end of the composition and set a new value for rotation. And now do a RAM preview. So here we have the Vegas effect with little dots traveling around the mask that we drew. I'll stop the RAM preview. Now let's see a mask used to define transparency. We'll go to the Future Section Final composition and go to the End by pressing the End key. Here we want to call more attention to the hero in the center of the frame and less attention to the areas outside. One way to do this is using a vignette. I'll draw an ellipse, again using the ellipse tool, and I'll start from the corner this time and drag an ellipse that is centered around his face. Here we have an entirely opaque region inside the closed mask and a transparent region outside. The Vector Graphics logo is on a different layer. I can turn it on and off here. I'll go ahead and leave it on. We want this vignette to be more subtle than this extremely abrupt fall off from completely opaque to completely transparent, so we'll use Feather. I'll press F to show the feather property, and then drag to increase the feather. Then if I press Ctrl-Shift-H to hide layer controls, which includes mask paths, we can see the result. That looks pretty good, although really what I'd like to have is for the feather to be a little bit different around the top compared to the sides. I'll press Ctrl-Shift-H to show the mask again. And I'll go here and choose the Mask Feather tool. Using the Mask Feather tool, you can pull away from the edge of a mask and affect the feather. If I want the feather to be different on the top versus the bottom and the sides, I can create a feather point in each of these places. And then drag each of them differently until I get the result that I like. I'll press Ctrl-Shift-H. And there's a simple vignette that calls attention to our hero and makes the areas around fade into blackness. Mask shapes don't have to be static, they can be animated. One common use of animating masks is rotoscoping, but we'll show a much simpler example. Let's go back to the composition that involves our can with the Vegas effect. And here, expand the mask to show its mask path. If I click the stopwatch for mask path, we've now made the mask path animated. And if I go to the middle of the composition here, have the selection tool, double click to select the entire mask and draw a bounding box around it. I can scale the mask and then go to the beginning of the composition. And scale it out the other way. Now notice, if I drag the current time indicator, the shape of the mask is changing between these two keyframes. The mask path is being interpolated in between, so that it's at its smallest here at this keyframe where we made it small, it's at its largest at this keyframe where we made it large, and it's at in-between values in between the two. So, those are the two most basic uses for masks, and that's how you animate mask shapes.